The stars looked different from this side of the galaxy. Captain Jacob Stone stood on the bridge of the USS Valiant, watching the view screen display thousands of distant suns. They had been traveling for 3 months since leaving Earth, and this was their first stop in truly unknown territory. The ship hummed with quiet energy around him, its fusion reactors running smoothly. Kate Morrison sat at her station, her eyes focused on the communication displays. She was young, only 26, but she had the best ears on the ship. That's what the crew called it when someone could pick up even the faintest signal from space. Right now, those ears were picking up something that made her stomach twist. "Captain, I'm reading energy signatures all around us," she said, her voice steady despite her concern. "Lots of them." Jacob walked over to her station and looked at the readings. His experienced eyes widened slightly. There were hundreds of contacts on the scanner, maybe thousands. They had dropped out of faster-than-light travel right into the middle of something big. Peter Hayes, the first officer, pulled up the tactical display. He was a careful man, always thinking 3 steps ahead. That caution had saved their lives more than once during the journey. "Sir, these readings suggest we're surrounded by ships. Military vessels based on their power signatures." The bridge went quiet. Every crew member felt the weight of that statement. They were explorers, not soldiers. The Valiant carried defensive weapons, but nothing that could stand against a real military force. They had come to the stars in peace, hoping to find other intelligent life and make friends. It looked like they had found that life, but the friendly part was still uncertain. Jacob made a decision quickly. "Katie, open all communication channels. Broadcast on every frequency we have. Let them know we're peaceful explorers from Earth." Kate's fingers moved across her controls. She sent out a message in dozens of formats, hoping something would get through. "This is the Earth vessel Valiant. We come in peace. We are explorers seeking contact with other intelligent species. Please respond." The answer came faster than expected, but not in any way they could understand. The computers picked up transmissions from multiple sources, but the language was completely alien. The translation programs that Earth's best scientists had created were useless. These were sounds and patterns that human ears had never heard before. Greg Palmer, the chief engineer, studied his displays from the engine room. He could see the power readings from the nearby ships, and what he saw worried him. "Captain, their reactor technology is different from ours, but I'm reading some massive power outputs. Some of these ships are 3 times our size." Jacob nodded, though Greg couldn't see him from engineering. "Keep our reactors running smooth, Greg. We might need to move fast." Hours passed with no clear communication. The alien ships maintained their positions around the Valiant, neither approaching nor backing away. It was like being watched by predators who hadn't decided if you were food or friend. The crew worked in tense silence, each person focused on their job but aware of the danger. Then the scanners picked up something new. 2 distinct groups of ships were present, and they were positioned on opposite sides of the Valiant. Peter studied the formation and realized what they had stumbled into. "Captain, I think we're in some kind of neutral zone. These 2 groups aren't just near us, they're facing each other. We're in the middle." Jacob felt his chest tighten. In all of Earth's history, neutral zones between powers meant one thing: tension. Wars started in neutral zones. Accidents happened in neutral zones. And now humans had just dropped a completely unknown variable right into the center of one. Kate suddenly spoke up, her voice excited. "Sir, I'm getting something. It's not language, but it's mathematical. They're sending us equations. Mathematics was universal. 2 + 2 = 4 everywhere in the universe. If these aliens were smart enough to build starships, they understood math." Kate worked with the computer to decode the equations, and slowly a message formed. "They're asking who we are," she said. "And more importantly, they're asking who we're aligned with." Jacob understood immediately. These 2 groups thought the humans were somehow connected to their conflict. They thought Earth was taking sides in whatever disagreement existed between them. He needed to make it clear that humans were neutral, that they didn't even know about this conflict until now. "Tell them we're not aligned with anyone. We're from far away, outside this region entirely. We have no knowledge of local politics or conflicts." Kate sent the message using the mathematical language they had established. The response came quickly from both groups. Neither one believed them. The timing was too convenient. An unknown species appearing exactly in the neutral zone between 2 powers. It had to be a trick. It had to be an alliance with the other side. Lisa Monroe, the pilot, watched her tactical display nervously. She was the youngest officer on the bridge, but she could fly the Valiant better than anyone. "Captain, ships from both groups are moving closer. I think they're trying to surround us more completely." Jacob made a choice that would echo across the galaxy. He could surrender to one side, but that would confirm the other side's suspicions. He could try to run, but they would chase, and it might start the very conflict he was trying to avoid. Or he could stand his ground and make it clear that humanity would not be pushed around. "All crew, this is the captain," he announced over the ship's communication system. "We're in a difficult situation, but we're going to handle it the way humans always have. We stand our ground. We defend ourselves if attacked, but we fire on no one unless fired upon first. We remain neutral no matter what." Helen Cruz, the medical officer who was helping at the tactical station, checked the weapon systems. She had never expected to use them for real. "Weapons are ready, Captain. But sir, if both these groups decide we're their enemy, we won't last long." "Then we make sure they understand we're nobody's enemy," Jacob replied, "and nobody's friend by force. Humanity doesn't take sides in conflicts we don't understand." The alien ships continued to close in. Somewhere in the command centers of two vast empires, leaders were making decisions about this strange new vessel. They were asking questions about human intentions, human technology, and human loyalties. The answers they came up with would determine whether first contact became first war. On the Valiant, the crew waited and prepared. They had come to explore the stars and expand human knowledge. Instead, they had stumbled into a situation that could reshape the entire galaxy. One human ship had appeared in the wrong place at the wrong time, and nothing would ever be the same again. The Zarathians were beautiful in their own way. Their bodies were made of living crystal that caught and reflected light in patterns that changed with their moods. They had evolved on a world where temperatures reached levels that would melt steel, and their crystalline forms were built to withstand such heat. Right now, their commander was burning bright with suspicion and anger. Brightness of Seven Suns was his name, translated as closely as possible into human concepts. He commanded a battle group of 20 warships, and he had been stationed at this neutral zone border for 5 cycles. 5 long cycles of watching the Kron Dominion across the empty space, waiting for any sign of aggression, and now this unknown ship had appeared right in the center, claiming to be neutral explorers. He didn't believe it for a moment. The timing was too perfect. The Kron had to be behind this. They had probably made some deal with these humans, promised them technology or territory in exchange for help breaking the long stalemate. Brightness of Seven Suns had seen many tricks in his military career, but this was bold even by Kron standards. On the other side of the neutral zone, the Kron saw things very differently. They were insectoid creatures with hard shells and multiple limbs that made them terrifying in close combat. But their greatest strength was their collective mind. Individual Kron were smart, but when they connected in their hive networks, they became brilliant. Right now, thousands of Kron minds were analyzing the situation and coming to a dangerous conclusion. Commander Skritclaw led the Kron forces in this sector. She was old for a Kron warrior, having survived 30 battles. Her carapace bore the scars of plasma burns and blade strikes. She had fought the Zarathians before and knew their tactics well. This sudden appearance of an unknown vessel was exactly the kind of deception the Zarathians loved. They claimed to be explorers. One of her subordinates transmitted through the hive link. "But their ship technology reads as more advanced than ours. How would simple explorers have such power?" Skritclaw agreed. The energy signatures from the human vessel showed reactor efficiency beyond what either the Kron or Zarathians had achieved. Someone had given these humans that technology, someone who wanted to shift the balance of power. The Zarathians had to be preparing for war. Back on the Valiant, the crew was starting to understand how bad the situation really was. Kate had managed to decode more of the alien communications by comparing the mathematical patterns. What she learned made her blood run cold. "Captain, I think both sides believe we're working with the other side," she reported. "The messages I'm intercepting suggest they think we're some kind of secret weapon or ally." Jacob ran a hand through his hair, a habit he had when stressed. "That's insane. We just arrived. We don't even know who these people are." "Logic doesn't matter when fear is involved," Peter said quietly. The first officer had studied military history extensively. He knew how many wars had started because of misunderstandings and fear. Both sides are scared that we're going to break the balance between them. Greg's voice came through from engineering. "Captain, I'm boosting power to the shields. If someone starts shooting, we'll need every bit of protection we can get." The words had barely left his mouth when the first shot was fired. A young Zarathian weapons officer, nervous and convinced that the human ship was preparing to attack, released a plasma burst. It was meant as a warning shot, fired to pass near the Valiant's bow. But in the confusion and tension, it looked like the start of an assault. The Kron response was immediate. If the Zarathians were attacking this unknown vessel, it could only mean the vessel was Kron-aligned. And if the Zarathians were willing to break the neutral zone peace, then the war everyone had been dreading was finally beginning. Skritklaw ordered her ships to open fire on Zarathian positions. On the Valiant's bridge, alarm screamed. Lisa's hands moved across her controls with practiced speed, throwing the ship into evasive maneuvers. The young pilot had trained in simulators for years, but this was real. Energy beams crossed space where the Valiant had been seconds before. "Return fire defensive only," Jacob ordered. His voice was calm despite the chaos. "Target their weapon systems, nothing else. Show them we can fight but don't want to kill." Helen worked the tactical controls, her medical training making her hesitant to cause harm even to aliens. But she was good at her job. The Valiant's particle beams lanced out with surgical precision, striking the weapon arrays on attacking ships. 3 Zarathian destroyers suddenly went dark, their guns disabled but their crews unharmed. The effect was immediate and shocking. Both the Zarathians and Kron had expected many things from this encounter, but not this level of accuracy. Military doctrine for both species involved overwhelming firepower and accepting heavy casualties. The idea of precisely disabling an enemy without killing was foreign to them. Brightness of Seven Suns watched his tactical display in disbelief. 3 of his ships had been taken out of the fight in seconds, but all crew were reporting safe. The human vessel could have destroyed them easily. "Why show mercy to an enemy? Unless they're not the enemy," one of his officers suggested. "Unless they really are what they claim to be." But it was too late for second thoughts. The Kron fleet was advancing and the Zarathians had to respond. Brightness of Seven Suns ordered his remaining ships to engage, not the humans now, but the Kron force that was using the situation to attack. The space around the Valiant erupted into battle. Plasma beams and kinetic weapons crossed the void. Shields flared and ships maneuvered desperately, and in the center of it all, the human ship danced between the fighting forces like a leaf in a storm. Lisa proved why she had been chosen for this mission. The Valiant twisted and turned through patterns that should have been impossible. The ship's inertial dampeners, a human innovation that neither empire possessed, allowed acceleration and direction changes that would have crushed any other crew. She threaded the vessel between explosions and energy beams with an artist's touch. Carl Bennett, who had been teaching tactics at the academy before joining this mission, coordinated the point defense systems. Missiles and torpedoes that got too close were intercepted by precision laser fire. The Valiant's computers, running quantum processors far beyond what the local empires used, calculated trajectories and fired with perfect timing. "We can't keep this up forever," Peter warned. "Our shields are holding, but we're using power faster than the reactor can generate it." Greg's voice crackled over the communication system. "I can give you more power, but I'll have to divert from life support. We'll have about 4 hours of air if I do." Jacob didn't hesitate. "Do it. 4 hours is better than 4 minutes." Kate continued trying to send messages to both fleets begging them to stop firing, explaining that the humans were not taking sides. But her words were lost in the chaos of battle. Ships were dying now on both sides. What had started as a standoff had become the shooting war that everyone had feared for so long. The worst part was that it was all a mistake. The humans hadn't wanted this. The Zarathians hadn't wanted this. Even the Kron, for all their warrior culture, had been content with the Cold War status quo. But fear and misunderstanding had combined to create a disaster. Skritklaw realized the truth too late. Watching the human ship carefully avoid killing anyone, seeing how it defended itself without aggression, she understood. These really were explorers who had stumbled into the wrong place. But her fleet was committed now, locked in battle with the Zarathians. Even if she ordered a ceasefire, the Zarathians wouldn't believe it. On dozens of worlds throughout both empires, news of the battle was spreading. Reports claimed that a powerful new faction had entered the conflict, that the long peace was over, that war had finally come. Military commanders began activating reserves. Civilian populations started evacuating border worlds. The machinery of war, dormant for so long, began grinding to life. And all because one human ship had appeared in the wrong place, at the wrong time. And two empires had been too afraid to believe in peaceful intentions. Jacob Stone watched the battle rage around his ship and wondered if humanity's first contact with alien life would also be its last. The news traveled at the speed of light, but in a galaxy with faster-than-light communication that meant everywhere at once. Within hours of the first shots being fired, every major power in the region knew what had happened. A single unknown ship had engaged both the Zerathian Collective and the Kron Dominion simultaneously. Even more shocking, that ship had survived. On the Zerathian homeworld, the Council of Radiance convened an emergency session. The council chamber was a cathedral of crystal and light, where the greatest minds of their species gathered to make decisions. Elder Frost at dawn spoke first, his ancient body glowing with a deep blue that signaled concern. "This changes everything," he said. "If this new faction has ships with such capability, and they have allied with the Kron, we face extinction." Other councilors agreed. The strategic balance that had kept peace for 3,000 years was broken. They had no choice but to respond with overwhelming force. Orders went out to military commanders across the collective. Prepare for war. Activate all reserves. The survival of their species was at stake. In the hive cities of the Kron homeworld, the Queen of Queens received reports from Skritclaw and other commanders. The hive mind processed the information with cold efficiency. The conclusion was clear and terrifying. The Zerathians had deployed a new weapon, these humans, and were preparing for conquest. The Dominion had to strike first or be destroyed. Additional battle groups were dispatched to the neutral zone. The Kron began evacuating civilian populations from border worlds and fortifying defensive positions. Factories that had been quiet for generations roared back to life, producing weapons and ships. War was coming, and they would be ready. Aboard the Valiant, the crew dealt with their own crisis. The battle had lasted 6 hours before both fleets had finally pulled back to regroup. The human ship had taken damage despite their advanced defenses. Scorch marks covered the hull and 2 of their point defense turrets were offline. Helen moved through the medical bay, treating injuries. Nothing life-threatening, thankfully, but burns and broken bones from when the ship had taken several direct hits. She worked quietly, efficiently, her mind focused on saving lives rather than thinking about the greater situation they faced. Greg was in engineering, trying to repair damaged systems with a skeleton crew. The reactor was stable, but the power distribution network had taken damage. "We're at 60% capacity," he reported to the bridge. "I can get us to 80 if you give me 12 hours. "You have 6, Jacob replied. His instincts told him the enemy would be back sooner rather than later. And this time, they would come in greater numbers. Peter was studying the tactical data they had collected during the battle. What he saw worried him deeply. "Captain, the technology gap isn't as large as we thought. Yes, our reactors are more efficient and our computers are faster, but they have advantages too. Their weapons are more powerful, and they have far more ships than we do." Kate interrupted with urgent news. "Sir, I'm picking up massive communication traffic. Both fleets are calling for reinforcements. And there's something else. I'm detecting broadcasts going out to other species in this region. The word is spreading about what happened." Jacob stood and walked to the view screen. The stars looked the same as always, peaceful and eternal. But he knew that peace was an illusion now. Somewhere out there, fleets were mobilizing, armies were preparing, and it was all because his ship had appeared in the wrong place. "We need to find a way to communicate with them," he said. "Make them understand this is all a mistake." But before anyone could respond, the sensors detected new arrivals. Not Zerathian or Kron ships this time. These were smaller vessels using different drive technologies. Within minutes, 14 ships had positioned themselves between the Valiant and the expected approach vector of enemy fleets. A transmission came through, audio only. The voice was translated by the computer, turning alien sounds into English words. "Human vessel, this is Admiral Kress of the Tellurian Republic. We have been watching what happened here. We understand you are not the aggressors. We stand with you." The bridge crew looked at each other in shock. They had allies. Species they had never even heard of were volunteering to help defend them. More transmissions followed. The Arinthian colonies, a bird-like species according to the limited visual data Kate could gather, sent a squadron of fighters. The Vex Collective, whoever they were, dispatched 3 cruisers. Even some border systems within the Zarathian Collective itself were sending messages of support. Peter understood first. Captain, I think we've done something these smaller species have been wanting to do for a long time. We stood up to both empires. We refused to be intimidated. Jacob was beginning to see the bigger picture. This wasn't just about humans anymore. This was about every species that had lived under the shadow of the great powers, afraid to speak up, afraid to demand their own voice in galactic affairs. The Valiant's refusal to bow had inspired them, but inspiration wouldn't stop the fleets that were coming. Kate's scanners showed the truth in harsh numbers. 30 Zarathian warships were inbound, along with 60 Kron vessels. The empires had decided that this situation had to be resolved with overwhelming force. Admiral Kress contacted them again.
Captain Stone, we know the odds.
We know what we're facing, but we're tired of living in fear. If this is where we make our stand, then so be it. Jacob felt the weight of responsibility crush down on him. These aliens were willing to die because of what the Valiant represented. He couldn't let that happen. There had to be another way. All ships, this is Captain Stone. I appreciate your support more than I can say, but I won't ask you to die for us. We're going to try something different. Greg spoke up from engineering. Captain, whatever you're planning, tell me now so I can prepare. We're not running and we're not hiding, Jacob said. We're going to talk. Kate, I need you to open a channel to both fleets, all frequencies, maximum power. I want every ship in this sector to hear what I'm about to say. Kate's fingers flew across her controls. Channel open, sir. You're broadcasting to everyone. Jacob took a deep breath. This was it. Everything depended on the next few minutes. This is Captain Jacob Stone of the Earth vessel Valiant. I'm speaking to both the Zarathian Collective and the Kron Dominion. I know you don't believe us, but we are not your enemies. We are not aligned with either of you. We come from a world called Earth, far beyond your borders. He paused, letting the translation programs do their work. My species has fought wars. Terrible wars. We've killed each other over misunderstandings and fear. We've nearly destroyed ourselves multiple times. But we learned something from all that suffering. We learned that talking is always better than fighting. That fear is the real enemy, not each other. On the bridge of the lead Zarathian battleship, Brightness of 7 Suns listened. He wanted to dismiss the words as propaganda, but something in the human captain's voice made him pause. In the Kron command vessel, Skritclaw heard the message through the Hive network. The collective mind analyzed every word, looking for deception. They found sincerity instead, which was almost more troubling. Jacob continued. You're both preparing to destroy us because you're afraid. Afraid will help the other side. Afraid will upset the balance you've maintained for so long. But that balance isn't peace. It's just frozen war, and we're offering you something different. A chance to actually talk to each other instead of just staring across this neutral zone. Captain, Peter warned quietly, the fleets are still approaching. They're not slowing down. Jacob ignored him and kept speaking. I'm not asking you to trust us. I'm asking you to consider what happens if you attack. You'll destroy one human ship, maybe, but you'll also start the war you've both been dreading. You'll kill these smaller species who came to help us. And for what? Because you're too afraid to believe that someone might actually want peace. He switched off the transmission and looked at his crew. Well, I tried. Lisa, be ready to maneuver. Helen, weapons ready, but hold fire unless I give the order. Greg, I need every bit of speed you can give me. The Allied ships that had come to help the Valiant held their positions. 14 vessels that had risked everything, because they believed in what the humans represented. They waited, weapons powered up, knowing they were probably going to die but determined to make that death count. The Zarathian and Kron fleets continued their approach. Weapons were charged. Shields were at maximum. The commanders on both sides had their orders. Destroy the unknown vessel and restore the balance of power. Nothing else mattered. On dozens of worlds, billions of beings watched and waited. Some hoped for peace. Others prepared for war. But everyone knew that what happened in the next few hours would determine the future of the entire galaxy. One human ship had sparked this crisis. Now they would see if one human captain could stop it. The fleets hung in space like storm clouds ready to break. 90 warships from the 2 greatest empires in the region faced off against one human vessel and 14 ships from smaller species. The math was simple and brutal. This would not be a battle. It would be an execution. But something strange was happening. The smaller species were not acting like victims. The Tellurian ships had formed a defensive formation around the Valiant, their shields overlapping to create a stronger barrier. The Arinthian fighters were running constant patrol patterns, their sensors sweeping for threats. The Vex cruisers had positioned themselves where they could intercept missiles aimed at the human ship. Admiral Kress opened a private channel to Captain Stone. "We need to coordinate our defenses. I'm sending you our shield frequency so your people can integrate with our systems." Jacob was amazed. "Admiral, you barely know us. Why are you doing this?" "Because you gave us hope," Kress replied simply. "For 3,000 years, we've watched the Zerathians and Kron dictate terms to the entire galaxy. We've had no voice, no power, no choice but to accept whatever they decided. You showed us that someone can say no to them. That's worth fighting for." Greg immediately got to work integrating the Tellurian shield technology with the Valiant systems. It was crude compared to human engineering, but it was effective. And more importantly, it meant they were working together, sharing technology and trust. Kate was monitoring communication traffic and noticed something interesting. "Captain, the Zerathian fleet has stopped advancing. They're holding position about 2 million kilometers out." Peter checked the tactical display. "The Kron fleet has stopped too. Same distance, opposite side. They're waiting for something." What they were waiting for became clear when both fleets transmitted simultaneously. The messages were nearly identical. Each empire demanded that the human ship surrender to them immediately. Each claimed that only they could guarantee the safety of the Valiant's crew. Each warned that refusal would result in destruction. "They're still convinced we're going to pick a side," Jacob said, shaking his head. "They can't imagine that we actually want to stay neutral." A new voice entered the communication network. It was young, nervous but determined. The computer translated it from Kron pheromone patterns. "Human Captain, this is Junior Warrior Velkach. I am defecting from the Dominion fleet. I have information you need." The bridge went silent. A Kron defector? That was unheard of. The Kron hive mind created absolute loyalty. Individuals didn't just leave their hive. "I'm listening," Jacob said carefully. "The Queen of Queens has authorized the use of quantum destabilizers," Velkach transmitted. "They are weapons banned by ancient treaty. They tear apart the fabric of space itself. The blast radius would destroy everything within 10 million kilometers. Your ship, the Zerathian fleet, all these worlds that have come to help you. Millions of beings will die." Helen's face went pale. "Captain, if that's true, we need to evacuate this entire sector." But Peter was already thinking strategically. "Why would a Kron warrior tell us this? What does he gain?" Velkach answered as if he had heard the question. "I am young, but I am not blind. I have watched the hive make decisions based on fear rather than wisdom. I have seen how we treat other species as lesser beings. When you refused to bow to either empire, when you offered peace instead of submission, it made me question everything I was taught." Kate was already spreading the information. She transmitted Velkach's warning to every ship in the sector, including the Zerathian fleet. The reaction was immediate and powerful. On the Zerathian command ship, Brightness of 7 Suns listened to the warning with growing horror. Quantum destabilizers were weapons of extinction. Yes, they would destroy the human ship, but they would also kill his entire fleet. The Kron were willing to sacrifice their own forces just to ensure the humans didn't survive. But then his science officer reported something that made his crystalline body pulse with anger. "Commander, we've detected similar weapons being prepared in our own fleet. The Council has authorized their use." The two empires had come to the same conclusion independently. If they couldn't capture or control the humans, then everything in this sector had to be destroyed. Better to kill millions than risk losing the balance of power that had kept them safe for so long. Jacob looked at the data Kate was showing him. The timeline was clear. Both fleets would fire their extinction weapons in approximately 4 hours. Everything and everyone would die. "We need to stop this, but how?" Greg had an idea. Crazy and dangerous. "Captain, I can modify our reactor output to jam the firing mechanisms on those weapons, but I'll need to bring the reactor up to 140% capacity. That's dangerous." We could overload and explode. Do it, Jacob ordered without hesitation. If we're going to die anyway, we might as well try something. But even as Greg worked on the reactor modifications, other things were happening across the sector. The news of the planned weapon deployment had spread to every world in range. Civilian populations were panicking. Governments were demanding answers from the empires. How could they justify killing millions of innocent beings? On the Zarathian homeworld, protests erupted. Citizens filled the streets, their crystalline bodies glowing with anger. They had believed their government was protecting them, maintaining peace. Now they learned that same government was willing to commit genocide to maintain control. The Kron reaction was more complex. The hive mind debated internally, different queens arguing over the correct course of action. For the first time in living memory, the Kron Dominion was not united. Some queens believed the weapon use was necessary. Others saw it as a betrayal of everything the Dominion stood for. Admiral Kress transmitted to Jacob again. Captain, whatever happens next, I want you to know something. You've changed the galaxy today. Whether you survive or not, the smaller species will remember. We won't go back to being silent and afraid. More ships were arriving now, not military vessels, but civilian craft. Freighters, passenger ships, even personal yachts. They came from dozens of species, and they all positioned themselves around the Valiant. They were forming a living shield. Thousands of civilians willing to die to protect the humans who had given them courage. Peter watched the tactical display with tears in his eyes. Sir, there are over 2,000 civilian ships out there now. If the empires fire those weapons, it won't just be us dying. It will be everyone who believed in what we represent. Jacob stood and faced his crew. They were young, most of them. They had signed up for exploration and discovery, not war and extinction. But here they were, at the center of a crisis that could destroy millions. He felt the weight of every life, depending on what he did next. Kate, open a channel to both fleets, maximum power, all frequencies. Channel open, Captain. Jacob spoke with a calm that he didn't feel. Zarathian Collective, Kron Dominion, I know about your weapons. I know you plan to destroy this entire sector rather than risk losing control. But look at what's happening around you. Thousands of civilians from dozens of species have come here. They're not warriors. They're not soldiers. They're just people who believe in the possibility of something better than endless fear. He paused, choosing his words carefully. If you fire those weapons, yes, you'll destroy us, but you'll also destroy them. And everyone in the galaxy will know what you did. Every species will see that you value your power more than their lives. Is that really the legacy you want? Brightness of Seven Suns watched his tactical display. The human was right. Over 2,000 civilian ships now filled the space around his fleet. If he fired the quantum destabilizers as ordered, he would kill more civilians than had died in the last 1,000 years of conflict. His people would be remembered as monsters. Skritclaw faced the same realization through the Hive network. The collective mind understood strategy and tactics perfectly, but this situation had moved beyond military calculations. This was about the soul of their species. If they committed this genocide, what would they become? On dozens of worlds, billions of beings waited for the decision. The empires that had ruled for so long held the power of extinction in their hands, and one human captain had challenged them to be better than their fear. The timer counted down. 3 hours until the weapons would be ready to fire. Then 2 hours. Then 1. The civilian ships held their position. The Allied military vessels stood ready, and aboard the Valiant, a crew of 200 humans prepared to face whatever came next. They had come to the stars seeking knowledge and friendship. Instead, they had found fear and war, but they had also found courage in unexpected places and allies among strangers. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. The moment of decision came not with violence but with silence. The quantum destabilizer countdown reached 0 and nothing happened. Both fleets held position, weapons charged but not fired. The civilian ships maintained their protective formation around the Valiant. Everyone waited. Then Brightness of Seven Suns did something that shocked his entire crew. He opened a direct communication channel to the human ship, video and audio. It was the first time anyone had seen a Zarathian clearly. His crystalline body glowed with soft blue light, and his face, alien as it was, showed something that translated clearly across species. Shame. Captain Stone, I am Brightness of Seven Suns, commander of the Zerathian battle group. I cannot fire the weapons my government ordered me to use. I cannot kill thousands of civilians just to eliminate one ship, even if that ship represents a threat to everything I know. Jacob appeared on screen from the Valiant's bridge. The two commanders looked at each other across the void, separated by biology and culture but connected by a shared moment of choice. Thank you, Commander, Jacob said simply. A second transmission came through. This one showed Skritclaw, the Kron commander. Her insectoid features were harder to read, but her posture and pheromone patterns transmitted respect. Human Captain, the hive mind is divided. Some queens still demand your destruction, but I have made a decision as an individual, not as part of the collective. I will not fire weapons of extinction. Not today. Peter leaned close to Jacob and whispered, Sir, do you understand what this means? A Kron commander just admitted to acting as an individual, separate from the hive. That's revolutionary for their species. But before Jacob could respond, chaos erupted in the Kron fleet. 5 ships broke formation and accelerated toward the Valiant. Their weapons were powering up, and they were broadcasting messages claiming that Skritclaw was a traitor. Corrupted by human influence, they're going to fire, Lisa warned, her hands ready on the pilot controls. The attack never came. Skritclaw's loyal ships moved to intercept, placing themselves between the rogue vessels and the humans. For the first time in recorded history, Kron were fighting other Kron. The hive mind had fractured, and the consequences were devastating to their society. Similar problems emerged in the Zerathian fleet. 3 commanders refused to stand down, claiming that Brightness of Seven Suns had been compromised. They tried to fire on the human vessel, but their own fleet moved to stop them. Crystal weapons clashed against crystal shields. The empire that had been united for 3,000 years was tearing itself apart. Jacob watched in horror. This is what we've caused. We've broken them. But Admiral Kress had a different perspective. No, Captain. You freed them. These empires have been held together by fear and tradition for so long that no one remembered how to question. You reminded them that there are choices. The fighting was brief but intense. When it ended, both fleets had traitors in custody and damaged ships limping back to repair stations. But more importantly, both fleets had commanders who had chosen mercy over orders, compassion over fear. Kate received a transmission that made her gasp. Captain, the Council of Radiance on the Zerathian homeworld has been dissolved. The citizens are demanding a new government, one that represents their values rather than just maintaining power. More news followed. The Kron hive mind had done something unprecedented. It had split into 3 separate collectives, each with different views on how to proceed. The unity that had defined their species for millennia was gone, replaced by diversity of thought. We need to meet, Jacob transmitted to both Brightness of Seven Suns and Skritclaw, face to face, on neutral ground. We need to figure out what happens next. The idea was bold to the point of insanity. The commanding officers of 3 forces that had been shooting at each other days ago, sitting down together. It should have been impossible. But after everything that had happened, impossible seemed like just another challenge to overcome. I agree, Brightness of Seven Suns replied. But where? Neither of our command ships would be considered neutral. Jacob smiled. What about right here? On the Valiant. My ship sparked this crisis. Maybe it can help solve it too. 24 hours later, 3 very different beings sat in the Valiant's conference room. Jacob had ordered it cleared of everything except a simple table and chairs. No weapons, no guards. Just 3 leaders trying to find a path forward. Brightness of Seven Suns spoke first, his translated voice filled with what sounded like exhaustion. I have been a commander for 40 cycles. In all that time, I was taught that the Kron were our eternal enemies, that they sought our destruction, that any weakness would lead to our extinction. Skritclaw clicked her mandibles in what the computer identified as acknowledgement. The hive taught me the same about your species. We prepared for war every moment of every day. We built weapons and ships and strategies all focused on the inevitable conflict with the Zerathians. But why? Jacob asked. When did this all start? The 2 alien commanders looked at each other. There was a long silence before Brightness of Seven Suns finally spoke. I do not know. The histories say there was an incident 3,000 years ago, a misunderstanding at a border world. But the details have been lost to time. The hive records are similar, Scritclaw added. There was conflict, and then there was fear. And the fear has shaped everything we've become. Jacob leaned forward. On Earth, we have a saying. Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. You've been repeating the same fear for 3,000 years because you forgot what started it. And now you have a chance to break that cycle. How? Brightness of Seven Suns asked. My people are rioting. The government is collapsing. There is chaos everywhere. The hive is fragmenting, Scritclaw said. Queens who have worked in harmony for generations are now arguing. Some call for immediate war. Others want peace. We are losing our identity. No, Jacob said firmly. You're finding your identity. Real identity. Not the one forced on you by fear and tradition, but one you choose. Yes, it's painful. Yes, it's chaotic, but it's also real growth. He stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the fleet of civilian ships that still surrounded them. Those people out there, they're from dozens of different species. They don't have powerful governments or massive militaries, but they came here anyway because they believed in something. They believed that the galaxy could be better than it has been. Pretty words, Scritclaw said, but her tone wasn't hostile. But how do we make them reality? Jacob turned back to face them. We start talking. Really talking. Not through intermediaries or diplomatic protocols, but directly. We find out what actually happened 3,000 years ago. We figure out what each of you needs to feel safe, and we build something new together. A council? Brightness of Seven Suns suggested. Where all species have a voice? Exactly. Not dominated by the biggest powers, but truly representative. Where the Tellurians and Orinthians and Vex have the same say as the Zorathians and Kron. Scritclaw was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. The Hive has analyzed ancient records going back further than we usually look. We found something. The original conflict 3,000 years ago. It was based on a translation error. Everyone stared at her. She continued, her pheromones showing embarrassment. A Zorathian diplomatic vessel used a metaphor about defending territory until the last sun goes dark. It was meant to express commitment to peace. But it was translated into our language as fighting until the last sun is extinguished. We thought it was a threat of total war. Brightness of Seven Suns went completely still, his crystalline body losing all color. 3,000 years of fear and preparation. Military buildups that consumed our resources. All because of a translation error. It seems so, Scritclaw confirmed. The three beings sat in silence, contemplating the weight of that revelation. Finally, Jacob spoke. Then you have a choice. You can focus on the tragedy of what was lost, or you can focus on the opportunity ahead. 3,000 years of unnecessary conflict is ending. What comes next is up to you. Over the following days, more meetings took place. Engineers from all three species began sharing technology. Medical officers exchanged information about their different biologies. Ordinary crew members from the various ships started mingling, learning about each other's cultures. Kate worked as a translator, helping to refine the computer's ability to handle the different alien languages. She discovered that both Zorathians and Kron had rich artistic traditions that had been suppressed during the long Cold War. Now, with peace becoming possible, those traditions were re-emerging. Greg collaborated with Zorathian crystal engineers and Kron hive technicians. He learned as much from them as they learned from him. The sharing of knowledge was creating bonds that would be hard to break. Helen treated wounded from all sides, making no distinction between human, Zorathian, or Kron. Her medical bay became a place where former enemies lay side by side, healing together. The civilian ships that had come to support the Valiant began organizing themselves into a coalition. Representatives from 20 different species met regularly to discuss what kind of galaxy they wanted to build. For the first time in their histories, they had hope that they could influence their own futures. 6 months had passed since the Valiant first appeared in the neutral zone. The ship still bore some scorch marks from those early battles, badges of honor that Captain Stone had decided not to repair completely. They served as reminders of how close the galaxy had come to total war. The conference chamber aboard the Valiant had been expanded 3 times now. What started as a simple room with a table had become the headquarters of something unprecedented in galactic history. The Galactic Council, as it was being called, met here regularly. Representatives from over 200 species gathered to discuss trade, security, cultural exchange, and everything else that affected life in this region of space. Kate sat at what had become her permanent station, managing communication between dozens of different language groups. She had learned more about alien linguistics in 6 months than most scholars learned in a lifetime. The translation computers had improved dramatically with her help, but there were still nuances that required a human touch. Peter served as the Council's chief of security, a job that seemed impossible at first. How do you protect beings with completely different biologies and threat profiles? But he had figured it out, working with security teams from each species to create protocols that worked for everyone. His biggest challenge was getting former enemies to work together, but even that was improving. Greg spent most of his time now teaching rather than engineering. Young technicians from across the galaxy came to learn about human reactor technology, and Greg learned about their innovations in return. The exchange of knowledge was creating technological advancement at a rate that amazed everyone. Things that would have taken decades were happening in months. Helen's medical bay had become a research center where doctors from multiple species worked together. They were discovering that their different approaches to medicine complemented each other beautifully. Zarathian crystal healing techniques combined with Kron biological manipulation and human surgical precision were saving lives that would have been lost before. Lisa had become an instructor too, teaching pilots from various species the techniques that had allowed her to navigate the Valiant through impossible situations. Her classes were always full, with eager students wanting to learn the human approach to flight. But the real story was happening in the council chambers. Today was a special session. After months of discussion and debate, they were finally going to formalize the agreements that would shape the future of the galaxy. Jacob stood at the podium, looking out at the assembled representatives. Brightness of Seven Suns sat in the front row, his crystalline body glowing with warm amber light that indicated contentment. Skritclaw was there too, along with representatives from 2 other Kron Hive collectives. The fragmentation of the Kron Hive mind had initially seemed like a disaster, but it had actually made them stronger. Different collectives could specialize in different areas, and they could debate ideas rather than just accepting whatever the queens decided. 6 months ago, my ship appeared in your space by accident, Jacob began. We had no idea what we were stumbling into. No idea of the fear and tension that had shaped this region for thousands of years. But what happened next showed me something about intelligent life everywhere. Given a choice between fear and hope, between isolation and cooperation, most beings will choose hope if they believe it's possible. Admiral Kress stood and added his voice. The Tellurian Republic had lived under the shadow of the great empires for 20 generations. We accepted it because we saw no alternative. The humans showed us that alternatives exist if you're brave enough to reach for them. An Orinthian representative, her feathers ruffled in what Jacob had learned was a sign of enthusiasm, spoke next. My people are traders and explorers by nature, but we had been afraid to expand, afraid to take risks. Now we're building new colonies and establishing trade routes we never dared to attempt before. The formal agreements were presented one by one. The Treaty of Valiant, named after the ship where it was negotiated, established several revolutionary principles. No species could claim exclusive territory. All species had the right to representation in galactic affairs. Military force could only be used in self-defense. Disputes would be resolved through mediation and discussion rather than threats. The most controversial provision was the one about shared technology. Many species had hoarded their innovations, seeing them as strategic advantages. Now they were agreeing to share openly, trusting that cooperation would benefit everyone more than competition. When the vote came, it wasn't unanimous. Some representatives argued that their species needed more time. Others worried about losing their cultural identity in a more connected galaxy. But the majority voted yes, and the treaty was adopted. Brightness of Seven Suns requested permission to speak. I commanded military forces for most of my life. I was trained to see threats everywhere and to respond with overwhelming force. The human arrival forced me to question everything I believed. It was painful. It still is painful. But I'm grateful for that pain because it led to growth. He paused, his crystalline form shimmering with complex emotions. The Zarathian collective is not what it was. Our government has been reformed. Our military has been reduced. We are vulnerable in ways we have never been before. But we are also free in ways we never imagined. Free to pursue art and science and philosophy without always preparing for war. That freedom is worth the vulnerability. Scritclaw added her perspective. The Kron hive mind was our greatest strength, but it was also a cage. We thought as one, which meant we could never grow beyond our existing ideas. The fragmentation that Captain Stone's arrival caused was traumatic. Queens who had worked together for centuries were suddenly arguing. But that argument led to innovation. Each hive collective is exploring different possibilities, and we share what we learn. We are more diverse and therefore more resilient. The session continued for hours. Representatives from smaller species spoke about their hopes and fears. Cultural exchanges were planned. Trade agreements were finalized. The framework for a new kind of galaxy was being built, piece by careful piece. During a break, Jacob stepped out onto an observation deck. Kate found him there, looking at the stars. "Thinking about Earth?" she asked. "Always," he admitted. "We sent a message 6 months ago. It'll take another 6 months for a response. I wonder what they'll think when they hear what happened." "They'll be proud," Kate said confidently. "We came here to explore and make contact. We did that and more. We helped change an entire region of space. Or we stumbled into a situation and got lucky," Jacob replied. "Sometimes I think about how easily this could have gone wrong. If that first Zarathian gunner had aimed better, if we had decided to surrender to one side, if those civilian ships hadn't come to help us," Kate smiled. "But none of those things happened. You made choices, we all did, and they led here. That's not luck, Captain. That's character." Back in the council chamber, the afternoon session focused on cultural exchange programs. Young people from different species would live and study together, learning about each other's worlds. Artists would collaborate across biological boundaries. Scientists would work on joint projects. A young Vex representative, barely old enough to have a vote, stood nervously to speak. "I was born during the Cold War. I grew up believing that the Zarathians and Kron were monsters who would destroy us if they had the chance. Now I have friends from both species. We play games together. We share food. They are not monsters. They are people just like me. This council gives me hope that my children will grow up in a better galaxy than I did." The chamber erupted in approval. Different species had different ways of showing it, but the sentiment was universal. This was about building a future for the next generation. As the session drew to a close, Jacob made a final announcement. "The Valiant will remain here as the council headquarters for now. But Earth is sending more ships. Diplomats, scientists, engineers, and yes, more explorers. Humanity wants to be part of this new galaxy you're building." He looked around the chamber at the incredible diversity of life represented there. "When we left Earth, we hoped to find intelligent life. We found it, and we found that intelligence takes countless forms. We found courage in unexpected places. We found that peace is always possible if people are willing to try. We also found that one ship, one crew, one moment of choice can change everything. We didn't set out to start a revolution. We just refused to accept that conflict was inevitable, and that refusal inspired others to question their own assumptions." Brightness of Seven Suns stood and approached the human captain. In Zarathian culture, touching was rare and significant. He extended one crystalline limb, and Jacob clasped it carefully. "Captain Stone, my people owe you a debt we can never fully repay. You gave us our future back." Scritclaw approached next. She released a pheromone pattern that the computer translated as deep respect, mixed with gratitude. The Kron collectives agree. We were prisoners of our own success, trapped by the very unity that made us strong. You helped us break free. Over the following weeks, the council's work continued. Not everything went smoothly. There were arguments about trade routes and territory. Cultural misunderstandings caused tension. Some species adapted to the